is one more system we need to bring back online. And the way to do that is to get rid of a sketchy stock cooler.
The wacky world of Multimedia J.
I went with the name Midnaughts for this system because it represents the best of what the Midnaughts had to offer. Core 2 Quad, Core 2 Duo era motherboard, graphics card from roughly around that time period, probably a little later, but ultimately the Midnaughts was the peak of the Core 2 era, and that is exactly what this represents, is the best that Core 2 had to offer. So Core 2 Quad and whatever the heck it can power in today's gaming world. That's the question that I want to answer with this old Core 2 era system. We just got to get rid of the stock cooler in order to make it happen. Some of you have probably seen this, and it's actually been in some intros on this channel before. It's an Intel stock cooler from the Core 2 Duo days. And of course it does technically work with the Core 2 Quad, but what doesn't work is these little plastic pins. After you insert and remove them a certain number of times, the plastic, haha plastic, wears out, and you eventually end up with this. And when it's loose like this, when it's standing up, it's not making good contact with the processor, and the heat spreader and the thermal compounds are not doing its job, so all of a sudden, your 30-something degrees Celsius computer is now 80 degrees and shutting off due to thermal shutdown or thermal throttling. So, we're getting rid of this thing once and for all, with some aftermarket stuff, so this can finally join the wonderful world of aftermarket coolers that the other systems have had for years. So the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo has recently been updated to support AMD Ryzen processors. Unfortunately, as part of the mechanical changes to make that happen, support for socket 775 appears to have been removed from some of the newer models. So we had to switch over to a Cooler Master Hyper T4, and as you can tell from the dinged box, this isn't new. So you figure with the experimental nature of Midnaughts, I figured I would experiment with Amazon's new refreshed parts business, which is some combination of pre-owned, open box, and refurbished. And it's sold at a notable discount. So we're going to see just how well this works as we roll the dice with what Amazon would consider a bargain bin or something like that. But yeah, this is going to be my first experiment with Amazon refreshed computer parts. But all that really matters with this Hyper T4 is that the metal be in good condition. So, I mean, I could download a manual from the internet if I needed to, and if the fan's no good, this thing takes 120mm fans, so I could probably just get something that way. Let's see what we have to play with here. Good. Intel socket down to 775. AMD socket is the old stuff. Just what I'm looking for. And I think there's dust on the lens. Hold on. Not bad if I do say so myself, it's just that all the hardware is in a zipper bag and stuff. The manual looks like it's been folded various different ways, but other than that and the wear and tear on the box, the unit itself actually appears to be in very good condition. Yeah, this looks mint. There's even a sticker on here. Of course, I imagine that they probably cleaned it off as best they could over at Amazon Refresh and just put a new one of these on or something. Or was it done at Cooler Master? I don't know. This is kind of nice. I wonder if some of these refreshed parts, as they're called, came over from some people that are constantly putting stuff in and out of their systems so they don't keep things very long anyways, because I can tell you this thing is clean. Very clean, very shiny. I can tell you that my Hyper 212 Evos would not be in this good a shape. So, heat pipes seem to be okay, although they're not as connected as they are on the 212 Evo. That was one of the selling points versus the 212 original or whatever came before it. The fan looks pretty nice too. Now the reason why I picked this thing up is specifically because the plastic fan holders will make it easier to swap in different fans later on, as opposed to those paper clip things I see on a lot of other inexpensive third-party coolers. So unfortunately, because it's a third-party cooler, some of this hardware is used to go under the motherboard, so we're going to have to take everything out all the way down to the motherboard again and install all this third-party cooling hardware. But then again, the stock cooler was garbage anyways, so why not? And I don't know if this comes in it when it's new, but it came in a styrofoam thing as well. Pretty nice experience for a so-called refreshed part. Okay, everything's out and the motherboard is loose, and we've not too bad for the application of the thermal material on the Core 2 there. Core 2s require the line method because things are bigger under the heat spreader. So I think it's vertical this way across the writing on the chip. Now, what happened with this thing was quite simply, see those little plastic things that go through the motherboard and hold in place? Why do I hear a motorcycle at 2:30 in the morning? Hashtag night shift problems, I don't know. So, yeah, so you can see here that the weakest link in these kinds of setups is these plastic pins, and one of them broke off over here. So, after X amount of time, now of course we could fix this very easily so that we could still keep using the stock cooler. Just install it upside down and work on breaking the other two pins. But this board has some overclock features that I'm not so sure you can achieve with a stock cooler. So, better to get rid of the cheap plastic pins in favor of something with some real hardware to it. Which is what I intend on doing here. Let's continue.
At Amazon Renewed, you can discover and buy pre-owned, refurbished, and open-box products that have been professionally inspected and tested to work and look like new by Amazon qualified and performance-managed suppliers.
Whoops, I had the wrong synonym. It's actually Amazon Renewed. That's a relatively new program anyways, but that's worth a shot.
Epic fail.
Well, folks, it is now the following evening, and once again the joke's on me. So, I've had that little Cooler Master box for a while that had all of the thermal compound and stuff related to CPU coolers. I thought I had replaced the box with a bag when I did the Geek House 5S and put everything in bags, so I went looking through all the bags and all the little jars that I have with all the stuff for tinkering with things, and I couldn't find it. So I was like, great, the one thing I'm missing is the heatsink compound in order to get this working. So, nuts. Let's order some heatsink compound then. So I placed the order has shipped, the heatsink compound is on its way. Look what I found! Yay!
Epic fail.
So we'll deal with this later, probably by putting the box inside a bag and putting these things in there with it, and just making it so that it stands out a little more in the way I'm storing everything with this 5S setup with all the zipper bags and stuff. So cool, we can continue, and we don't have to wait for the heatsink compound to come in. I'm just going to have quite a surplus of heatsink compound unless some of this stuff's dried up in the last year. Yeah. Organization is key with stuff like this. That's looking more like it. This is a mechanical mock-up without any actual thermal compound. So this is an interesting setup for socket 775. There's a back plate, you slide the tabs over so the bolts are in the right spot. Then you have these little barrel things that go over the top. Then you put on some guide rails, and then eventually that is what the piece in the middle hooks to. The result is something that kind of resembles a stock cooler. So you get this little flip arm, you just put it down and just lock it into place like that. It definitely has less metal than the Hyper 212 Evo, so this isn't really supposed to be as good of a model, but I imagine it's probably better than the stock cooler. So, let's send this thing live. Let's put some heatsink compound on this thing, finish cleaning it off, apply via the line method with what I have left, and hook everything up. We'll start with, of course, the stock Cooler Master fan, but what's to say, where is that thing? What's to say we couldn't upgrade this to a Noctua later on, much like we did with the others, or find a better Noctua to put in one of the newer computers and bring that one over here. Maybe Monolith could use a fan upgrade or something like that at this point. Has to be pressure related though if it's blowing into or pressure focused if it's blowing through a heatsink. Going back to, of course, what Arctic Silver recommends with the line method, because of the size of the die underneath the heat spreader, you basically want to do this to end up with this in terms of coverage, which is what I had before. So the question is, how do you translate this diagram into a processor that's already installed that could be at an angle? Well, we go by, of course, the triangle. So we have the little triangle in the corner that tells you how to put it in the slot. And based on the application recommendations, we want the line method heading towards the triangle being in the lower left. So if we cross-reference that to an eBay listing for a Q9400, we see, of course, that the triangle is down in the lower left. So that means we're doing the line method across the writing. Not the line method through the writing, but we're doing it in the direction of the writing. Otherwise, you end up with compound in the wrong spot and the edge of the die getting a little too hot, which I've had before, and I wonder why the thing ran so hot on the old Core 2 Duo. Newer processors can just use the dot method because things have gotten smaller over the years. But that tells me, of course, line method across the writing. Let's go put everything together now. Okay, that was pretty rough. I'm probably going to end up redoing this at some point because I gotta take that little connector thing and put it so that the clip with the slider thing, or the thing that you clamp it into place with, is on this side instead of on the other side, because when it's on the right side it kind of creates issues for the fan in terms of pushing everything through and creating pseudo push-pull with the chassis fan right behind it. So I don't know how much this is going to make things not work, but I think I want the fan to line up with the heatsink because the Evo is bigger and I have clearance issues with the RAM in the other systems. So I figure with this thing, why not be able to get it right or something like that. We'll rig something up later on. For now though, what's going to happen when we apply power? We have just enough stuff plugged in for this to turn on if it's right. See if it cooks itself. See if we can get into the BIOS and go to PC health settings. We get a post, but we do have, I believe, the warnings set up for this thing. Yep, it took the delete key here. PC health, let's keep an eye on this. 22 degrees, 23 degrees. See if it gets too high too soon. But hey, yeah, there we go. Is this blowing? Yeah, this is blowing in push mode. This is blowing through. This is set up to blow through the heatsink like it's supposed to. Just gotta figure out what to do about this cable afterwards because of the orientation of the fan. Probably have to reattach it some other way. So, alright, we have 25 degrees. You know what? Let's just wing it and put the cover back on this thing and see how it works. Okay, I've had this thing cook testing for a while and it looks like this thing's able to get into the 30s without any of the overclocking going on. However, I am going to fix the cooler and other stuff before I start doing anything serious with this machine again. So let's get that done. Now that's much better. Now the fan can actually go down all the way, like it's supposed to. So, try number 2, and I actually reinstalled a 750 gig WD green that I used to use in the old cable thing from way back when. And of course we have the Intel SSD ready to go for the system. So, Core 2 Quad system, what does it do? I love how quiet it is, though. Of course, going from a stock cooler to 120 millimeters will do that. Stop thumping the keyboard against the case. Yeah. So our settings have reset, so we might have to put another battery in this thing. Nuts! But what do we have for PC health? Let's watch that temperature very, very closely. So we're starting out at 24 degrees on both to start. But that's a really quiet system. 120 millimeter fans, baby. So let's cook test this and see how much higher it goes. This is also with the overclocking turned off. I got into the darn keyboard. I got into the 30s earlier because I was playing with some of the CIA settings, which is the fancy name for built-in overclocking that this motherboard has. So you have sports mode, cruising mode, full throttle, things like that. We're not going to play with that though until the heatsink compound has cured, so not off the bat. Maybe when we're testing to see how long Core 2 Quad can stay in the game as far as gaming is concerned, for the people out there that might be building Core 2 era gaming PCs because they don't have a lot of money, we'll do some playing around with that kind of stuff. But for now, I just want to run things bone stock with the built-in clocks to see what this thing can do out of the box. Okay, that's it. We got it. So now we have a fleet full of systems that we can put games on and compare how they all do nowadays, even if it means passing around the 1050 Ti from the Dellosaurus to have somewhat recent graphics. The sad part is, even that 1050 Ti isn't the latest technology. There's a newer, no power required graphics card out there, but we're just going to pass around the 1050 Ti just to have a baseline. So, we got into Nova Bench, we got 400 something and 200 something with my R6, which was my Skyrim graphics card from when the original Skyrim came out, so we're going back. Anyways, processor temps wise, we got it up to around 40 degrees or so. We haven't started messing with the built-in overclocking on the board yet, so I'm curious what kind of a difference everything makes in terms of heat as well as performance when it comes to the so-called CIA mode on this old motherboard. And of course, since this doesn't have a Windows 10 license, we're stuck with bone stock, unactivated Win 10, so I hope you like the default backgrounds and how everything looks with zero customization available. So, what can I say? We're going to see just how far this Core 2 Quad can still be relevant. I'm even wondering if there might be a way to update the motherboard so that this thing will take 8 gigs of RAM, even though it's DDR2. So, yeah, It's interesting just how discounted all these ancient computer parts are on sites like Newegg and stuff when you get the third-party logistic folks involved. So anyways, as a great introduction to Amazon Renewed, I definitely say this was pretty decent. Yeah, the box was dinged up and stuff, but I eventually got the heatsink thing working, and it looks okay now, and it runs okay. And of course, we've got 2 stock coolers to figure out what to do with. One from the Intel side and one from the AMD side, which this is the one that the FX8320E came with. You can imagine that bulldozer-era chip running off of something this small as a stock cooler. Yeah, stock coolers are rubbish, and I don't mean the computer that's hiding in there. Definitely from the day and age before AMD started doing the stuff with the Wraith coolers and things like that. So, Midnaughts, ready for action. I may try upgrading the RAM again with some of the stuff that's out there, otherwise we'll see how far 4 gigs goes on an ancient Core 2 era machine like this. So, now begins the long, arduous journey off-screen of getting a bunch of games copied over to all these systems that we can run benchmarks on and compare them against. I'm not so sure I even want to continue using NovaBench. I think User Benchmark with its more portable form factor would probably be a better option. And I'm not just saying that because ever since the latest Windows 10 update, NovaBench refuses to run on Monolith. Whatever. So, Midnaughts is up and running, and the fleet, so to speak, is up and running. A little bit of 1050 Ti flipping around, and we'll see how some of these old processors fare with semi-recent graphics technology. Till next time, this is Multimedia J, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.